The first time my mother-in-law used my husband's debit card, she withdrew $200 and called it an emergency. The last time, she filled a department store counter with nearly $3,000 worth of merchandise and screamed when the card was declined. By then, I knew exactly where the card had come from. I had video of her taking it from our bedroom. What I didn't know was whether my husband would finally believe the evidence or blame me for finding it. 6 months earlier, I had been sitting at our kitchen island in Centerville, Ohio, reconciling the joint checking account. I'm a senior financial analyst for an aerospace supplier outside Dayton, and reviewing our household expenses on the first Sunday of every month was as ordinary to me as doing laundry. That morning, one transaction caught my attention: a $200 cash withdrawal from a bank branch near the Green Shopping Center. I hadn't made it. My husband, Eric, had spent Friday supervising a hospital renovation in Beaver Creek. He rarely carried cash, and when he did, he withdrew it from the ATM near his job site. I checked the date, location, and balance twice before asking him. He was standing at the stove making scrambled eggs. "Did you take 200 out of checking on Friday?" His shoulders tightened for half a second. "It was for Mom," he said. "She needed help with medication." "What medication?" "I don't know, Claire. Something her insurance didn't cover." His answer came too quickly, yet he sounded annoyed that I had asked at all. "If she needs help with prescriptions, that's fine. I just want us to discuss it before money comes out of the joint account. It was $200, not our retirement fund." "That isn't the point." He turned off the burner harder than necessary. She was embarrassed. She didn't want you knowing her business. But apparently, she was comfortable making her business part of our checking account. I didn't say that. Not yet. Eric and I had been married for 6 years. We owned a modest brick ranch on a quiet street where people decorated for every holiday and complained about speeding cars in the neighborhood Facebook group. I had refinished the hardwood floors myself. Eric had rebuilt the back deck. We had talked about turning the small third bedroom into a nursery, though every time I mentioned a timeline, he said we should wait until work settled down. His mother, Patricia, lived 12 minutes away in the house where Eric and his younger sister had grown up. She had been widowed for 9 years and built her identity around being needed. To outsiders, Patricia was generous and capable. She coordinated meal deliveries at church, sent handwritten birthday cards, and remembered whose child had braces or whose husband had been laid off. With me, her kindness always carried a correction. She moved my dishes because I stored them inefficiently. She replaced the curtains I chose because mine made the living room look unfinished. Once, while I was at work, she donated 3 of my coats because she thought they were unflattering. She could enter our house because Eric had given her a spare key before our wedding. It hung from a red leather keychain she had carried for years. For emergencies, he had explained. Patricia experienced a surprising number of emergencies while we were both at work. She checked a faucet she thought might be leaking. She brought in packages that could have stayed safely on the porch. She once drove over because she had a feeling I'd left my curling iron plugged in. Whenever I objected, Eric gave the same answer: "That's just Mom." The second unexplained withdrawal appeared 5 weeks later. This time, it was $275, taken from the same branch on a Tuesday afternoon. I printed the statement and placed it beside Eric's plate at dinner. He looked at the highlighted transaction. "What am I supposed to be seeing?" "You tell me." He studied it longer than the question required. "Maybe you forgot taking it out." "I didn't. You handle dozens of accounts at work. You've been exhausted. People forget things." I stared at him. Of all the defenses he could have chosen, he questioned whether I could track money. It was like accusing a pilot of forgetting which runway she had landed on. "I called the bank," I said. "The withdrawal was made using your debit card and PIN." He pushed the statement away. "Then I must given Mom some cash." "For what?" "I don't remember. You remembered last month." His mouth tightened. "Why are you interrogating me? I'm asking where our money went." She raised me by herself after Dad got sick. If she needs something, I'm not making her submit a purchase order. Neither was I. I was asking for honesty. I told him that any future help for Patricia had to be discussed in advance. I also asked him to retrieve her key. He promised he would handle both. The following Sunday was Patricia's 65th birthday. 14 relatives crowded around her dining room table, beneath framed photographs that covered every stage of Eric's life. There were baby pictures, football pictures, graduation pictures, and wedding pictures. But in the only wedding photograph on display, I had been cropped out. Patricia's sister asked whether Eric and I might host Thanksgiving that year. Patricia reached across the table and touched my wrist. "Oh, Linda, Claire doesn't need that pressure. Besides, Thanksgiving should stay with family." A few people gave uncertain laughs. I looked directly at her. "I thought marrying Eric made me family." Her smile never moved. "You're his wife. That's different." Eric squeezed my knee under the table as if he were comforting me, then continued eating. Across from us, his sister, Megan, lowered her fork. She didn't defend me, but she didn't laugh either. She watched her mother with an expression I couldn't interpret. On the drive home, I asked Eric why he had said nothing. She was joking. She wasn't. "You know how she is." "Yes," I said. "I'm starting to." The next morning, I opened an individual checking account at a different bank and redirected my paycheck there. I continued transferring my full share of the mortgage, utilities, insurance, groceries, and household savings into our joint account. Every shared expense remained covered. I told Eric exactly what I had done. He reacted as though I had emptied the house during the night. Married people don't hide money. I'm not hiding anything. The account is in my name, and I've shown you the budget. Then why do you need it? Because money is leaving our joint account without my knowledge. Within a week, Patricia began telling relatives that I was financially abandoning her son. At a Memorial Day cookout, I heard her speaking to a cousin near the patio. "Eric works 60-hour weeks while Claire keeps her money tucked away," she said. I don't know what young wives are being taught anymore. I stood 10 feet away, holding a bowl of pasta salad I had made from Patricia's recipe. She knew I could hear her. That was the purpose. For years, I had believed that if I remained patient, useful, and reasonable, Patricia would eventually accept me. That afternoon, I understood the arrangement more clearly. Nothing I did could earn membership in a family that benefited from keeping me outside it. In June, 2 packages disappeared from porches on our street. When a set of drill bits Eric ordered went missing, he bought a video doorbell and installed it himself. The camera was intended to catch a stranger. Instead, it documented Patricia. The withdrawals resumed in July. They were less predictable now. $95 at a grocery store, $160 from an ATM, $425 from the branch near the mall. Eric supplied a different explanation for each one. Lunch for his crew, a repair at his mother's house, cash he had earned from overtime. I stopped confronting him and created a private spreadsheet. I recorded the date, time, amount, location, and explanation attached to every questionable transaction. The pattern became obvious within weeks. Most occurred on Tuesdays and Fridays, when Eric worked late concrete pours and I stayed at the office for month-end reporting. On those days, our house was guaranteed to be empty. One Wednesday night, after Eric fell asleep, I opened the doorbell camera app and reviewed the stored footage. At 2:17 on a Tuesday afternoon, Patricia's silver Lexus pulled into our driveway. She walked to the front door, removed the red leather keychain from her purse, and let herself inside. The key Eric claimed he had retrieved months earlier was still in her possession. She remained in our house for 43 minutes. When she emerged, she carried nothing. She locked the door, checked the handle, and drove away. The following evening, I skipped a company softball game and searched my own house. Nothing obvious was missing, but several things had been disturbed. The tax folders in our bedroom closet leaned in the opposite direction. The bottom drawer of my nightstand wasn't fully closed. An envelope containing a statement from my personal bank had been opened and resealed. Patricia had seen my balance. On my dresser, a bottle of perfume Eric had given me stood with its cap crooked. I picked it up and recognized the scent Patricia had worn at church the previous Sunday. She had entered my bedroom, read my mail, examined my financial records, and used my perfume. I photographed everything before putting it back. Then I downloaded the camera footage and saved copies on 2 encrypted drives. Sunday morning, I showed Eric the video. For the first few seconds, he looked genuinely disturbed. Then he started protecting her. Maybe she was checking something. For 43 minutes? She might brought something over. She entered empty-handed and left empty-handed. I'll ask her. He called Patricia on speaker. She did not explain why she had been inside. Instead, her voice broke. I feel like I'm losing you, she told him. Ever since you married Claire, everything has become permission and rules. I only wanted to feel welcome in my son's home. You are welcome, Eric said immediately. Apparently, I'm being monitored like a criminal. The camera had been installed by her son, facing a public porch, after a theft. Somehow, within 3 minutes, Patricia transformed evidence of her unauthorized entry into evidence of my cruelty. Eric apologized to her. When the call ended, I asked, do you understand that she never answered the question? She's lonely. That isn't an answer either. She's my mother, Claire. What am I supposed to do? It was his favorite question because it allowed him to sound helpless while making a choice. 2 days later, women from Patricia's church began sending him supportive messages about the trouble in his marriage. One told him she was praying that I would soften my heart. Patricia had entered our home, invaded my privacy, and taken our money. Yet, outside our kitchen, I had somehow become the dangerous one. I bought a fire-resistant document box with a combination lock. Inside it, I placed bank statements, photographs, a written timeline, copies of the video files, and records of every conversation I could verify. Then I put the box beneath the cargo floor in my car. My vehicle was the only private space Patricia could not enter. At the end of August, I visited my mother in Cincinnati and told her most of what had happened. She listened while folding a dish towel into narrower and narrower rectangles. Finally, she said, marriage requires endurance. Don't force a man to choose between his wife and his mother. I'm not asking him to stop loving her. I'm asking him to protect our home. Patricia is difficult, but Eric is a good husband. Good husbands can still fail their wives. My mother's eyes dropped to the towel. Her own mother-in-law had criticized her housekeeping for 20 years, while my father avoided every conflict. My mother called that keeping the peace. Her generation had survived by hiding grocery money in winter coats and treating privacy like a guilty pleasure. Her advice wasn't really advice. It was an inheritance. I drove home determined not to accept it. Eric agreed to marriage counseling. During our first session, he admitted that he became frightened and passive whenever Patricia was upset. I feel like I'm 12 years old again, he said. If Mom cries, I'll say anything to make it stop. For the first time, he acknowledged that I had been carrying the practical and emotional weight of our marriage. I left the session hopeful. Then, while Eric went back inside to schedule another appointment, his phone lit up on the passenger seat. Patricia had called 8 times during our 50-minute session. A week later, Megan phoned me from Columbus. Mom is telling the family you're having an affair, she said without a greeting. She claims the separate account proves you're planning to leave with someone. I turned off the stove beneath a pot of soup. Does Eric know? Not yet. I wanted you to hear it first. Why would she say that? Because if your marriage ends, she needs everyone to blame you before they learn what she did. Megan paused before adding, this isn't new behavior. It's learned behavior. What does that mean? Ask her what happened when she married Dad. Before I could press her, Megan said she had already told me more than she intended and ended the call. Our second counseling appointment was interrupted before we left the driveway. Patricia's neighbor called to report that she was having chest pain. We drove her to the emergency room. After several hours of testing, the doctors found no cardiac problem and discharged her with instructions to follow up with her primary care physician about anxiety. That evening, She stood in her kitchen packaging brownies for the neighbors who had worried about her. While Eric carried her laundry upstairs, Patricia looked at me over the counter. The corner of her mouth lifted. It was the third medical crisis in 6 years to occur just as Eric and I were leaving for something important. Our anniversary weekend, a dinner celebrating my promotion, and now counseling. On the way home, Eric stared through the windshield. "She's my mother. What am I supposed to do?" This time I didn't answer. The next morning, I called a family law attorney. Rachel Brooks worked above a coffee shop in downtown Dayton. She was direct, composed, and unimpressed by drama. "Bring documents," she told me. "I can evaluate records. I can't evaluate adjectives." I brought the locked box. Rachel reviewed the bank statements, camera footage, photographs, and timeline without interrupting. When she finished, she closed the file. "You have enough evidence," she said. "The question is what you want to do with it." I started explaining that Eric had agreed to counseling and was beginning to understand. Rachel held up one hand. "You keep your evidence locked in your car because you don't feel safe storing it in your home. Whatever decision you make, don't minimize what that means." I asked her to prepare divorce papers but not file them. She explained Ohio's process, likely property division, temporary financial orders, and the difference between documenting wrongdoing and expecting a judge to punish a spouse for having an overbearing parent. There would be no surprise courtroom victory. If I left, I would need a practical plan. I began building one. I moved important documents to a safe deposit box. I changed the passwords on my personal accounts and enabled two-factor authentication. I photographed household property, checked both of our credit reports, and arranged to stay temporarily with a coworker if necessary. Before making a final decision, I gave Eric one last opportunity. After dinner on Thursday, I placed both hands on the kitchen island. "I need you to change the locks with me this weekend." He looked up from his phone. "That's all I'm asking. We buy 2 new deadbolts. Nobody gets a key unless we both agree. Your mother can visit when we're home." He was quiet long enough that I thought he finally understood. Then he said, "Let me talk to Mom first. I don't want her to take it the wrong way." Something inside me settled. Changing the locks on our house required his mother's approval. There was no confusion left to solve. The following evening, Patricia arrived uninvited, using the red key. She cried in our living room and asked Eric how he could allow his wife to lock a grieving widow out of her son's life. She compared a new deadbolt to losing her husband all over again. Eric sat beside her, rubbing her back. "No one is locking you out," he promised. I remained in the armchair across from them and watched my marriage end without anyone saying the word. When Patricia left, the doorbell camera recorded her on the porch. The instant the door closed behind her, she stopped crying. She checked her reflection in the glass, fixed her hair, and walked to her car with a satisfied smile. I saved the clip. The next morning, I signed the divorce petition in Rachel's office, but instructed her to hold it until I authorized filing. I packed 2 suitcases and stored them in my coworker's garage. After that, all I needed was the moment Rachel had warned me would eventually come. The moment no one could explain away. It arrived the following Friday. At 1:46 p.m., my phone alerted me to motion at the front door. Patricia entered our house. This visit lasted only 7 minutes. When she left, her right hand was closed around a small rectangular object. That night, Eric emptied his wallet twice. "Have you seen my debit card?" "No." "You didn't take it to check something?" Even then, his first instinct was to suspect me. "Look at the camera," I said. He froze. He knew exactly what he might see, but instead of opening the app, he shoved his wallet into his pocket. "I probably left it in my truck." He went to bed without checking. At 8 the next morning, I called the bank's fraud department. Because the account was joint and I could identify unauthorized activity, the representative blocked Eric's missing card and opened an investigation. She explained that the bank would need a police report if I was alleging theft by a known person. I drove to the Centerville Police Department and provided the footage, transaction records, and a written statement. When the officer asked for the suspect's name, I said, "Patricia Lawson." She's my mother-in-law. Filing the report did not produce flashing lights or an immediate arrest. An officer would review the evidence, contact the relevant parties, and forward the case if probable cause existed. That ordinary process felt more powerful than any family confrontation. For once, the truth had a case number. Outside the station, I called Megan. "What happened when your mother married your father?" Megan went silent. Then she told me Patricia had once been the outsider. Eric's grandmother required Patricia to surrender most of her paycheck from the dental office every Friday. She entered Patricia's home without knocking and referred to her as the girl Tom married. Eric's father never intervened. "Mom hated her," Megan said, "but after Grandma died, Mom started acting exactly like her. She thinks control is what mothers earn for surviving." For the first time, I understood Patricia as more than an antagonist. She had spent years being humiliated and had mistaken becoming the person with power for healing. I felt compassion for her. It did not require me to give her another chance to harm me. Eric left for a Saturday job site inspection shortly after 9. I carried the locked box into the kitchen and arranged its contents across the table. Bank statements, photographs, the entry log, copies of the video footage, the police report, and the signed divorce petition. I propped my tablet beside them, paused on the image of Patricia entering our home the previous afternoon. At 12:14, Eric called. I let it ring. He called again 3 minutes later, then sent a message. "What did you do to the card?" Across town, Patricia had taken a cart filled with clothes, expensive cookware, cosmetics, and a stand mixer to a department store register. The total was just under $2,800. She used Eric's stolen card. It declined. She tried again, demanded that the cashier enter the number manually, and finally called Eric from the register. Instead of hiding what she had done, she complained that his bank had humiliated her. Eric arrived home at 12:47. He came through the kitchen door with his phone in his hand. "Claire, did you freeze my?" Then he saw the table. His eyes moved from the highlighted statements to the police report and finally to the divorce petition. I pointed to the tablet. "Watch." He pressed play. His mother appeared on the screen, unlocked our front door, and entered. 7 minutes later, she emerged with his debit card visible between her fingers. Eric replayed the clip. Before he could speak, Patricia's Lexus stopped in our driveway. She let herself inside without knocking. "Tell your wife to call the bank," she began. I have never been so embarrassed in my. She saw the evidence covering the table. For one brief second, there was no performance in her face. Then her eyes filled. "Eric, I only borrowed the card. I was going to replace whatever I spent." "You've been taking money since March," I said. "That is ridiculous." I read the amounts and dates aloud. I showed her the footage log documenting 9 unauthorized entries. I placed the photograph of my opened bank statement beside the video, still from that same afternoon. Finally, I held up the police report. "The bank required this for its investigation. You are named as the suspected person who took the card." Her tears disappeared. "You reported me to the police?" "Yes." "You would do that to family?" I looked at her for a moment. "You told me I wasn't family. You were right about one thing. Your rules never included me. I've stopped trying to qualify." She turned to Eric, expecting him to rescue her. He looked at the tablet again, then scrolled through the earlier clips. His mother entered our house over and over while we were working. Each date contradicted a promise he had made to me. "Give me the key," he said. Patricia stared at him. "Excuse me?" "The red key. Put it on the table. I am your mother, and this is our house." Her hand closed around the keychain. Eric stepped toward the front door and opened it. "Leave the key and go home." Patricia placed it on the table with a sharp metallic sound. Then Eric turned to me. "I'll change the locks today. I'll close the joint account and cooperate with the police. I'll go back to counseling alone. She'll never enter this house again." His voice broke. "I'm choosing you." I believed him. That was what made the moment painful. He meant every promise, but he meant it only after the cost became visible to him. I had needed him when the harm was small enough to stop. He offered protection only after I had learned to protect myself. I signed the last authorization Rachel needed to file the petition. Eric stared at my name on the page. Please don't do this. The police report stays, and so does the divorce. Patricia made a disgusted sound. She planned all of this. No, Eric said quietly. She documented it. He finally understood the difference. Megan arrived 20 minutes later after Eric called her. She took one look at the table and asked no questions. Come on, Mom, she said. At the door, Patricia turned toward Eric. She'll come back. Wives get angry, but family is permanent. I picked up the red key and placed it beside the police report. No, I said. Consequences are permanent. Family has to be maintained. After they left, Eric sat at the kitchen table with his head bowed. I kept asking what I was supposed to do. He said, You were supposed to believe your wife before she needed exhibits. I carried my suitcases from the garage and loaded them into my car. Eric did not block the doorway or ask me to comfort him. It was the first boundary he respected without being taught. The bank investigation took several weeks. The police interviewed Patricia, Eric, the store employees, and me. Security footage from the department store confirmed that she had attempted to use the card, while our camera showed her taking it. The county prosecutor eventually offered her a diversion agreement because she had no prior record. She was required to repay $1,510 in unauthorized withdrawals, complete a financial responsibility course, and have no further violations. If she complied, the theft charge would be dismissed after the program. I did not object. Accountability mattered more to me than revenge. Rachel also sought a civil stalking protection order based on the repeated unauthorized entries and Patricia's escalating contact after I moved out. A magistrate issued temporary restrictions, and after a full hearing, a longer order remained in effect through the divorce. Eric did not contest the dissolution or conceal assets. We sold the house that winter and divided the net proceeds according to the settlement. He kept his retirement account. I kept mine. We closed the joint accounts after the final expenses cleared. I rented an apartment near downtown Dayton with tall windows and a kitchen smaller than the one I had left. Only one person had a key. Almost a year after the divorce became final, Eric mailed me a handwritten letter. He did not ask me to return. He wrote that he had attended therapy every week for 10 months. He spoke with Patricia once a week and ended the call whenever she insulted me or tried to make him responsible for her emotions. They met in public for holidays. She no longer had keys to his home, access to his accounts, or permission to contact his employer. He apologized without excuses. He listed the moments when he had failed me, including the small ones he once dismissed as harmless. At the end, he wrote, I finally learned the answer to the question I kept asking. I was supposed to act like an adult, even when my mother was upset. I'm sorry you had to leave before I did. I read the letter twice. I still loved parts of the man who wrote it. Love did not restore trust, but I was grateful that he had finally begun the work. I filed the letter in the locked box, which now sat openly on a shelf instead of hidden in my car. My mother changed too, though more slowly. During one visit, she asked me how to open a bank account in her own name. We went together the following week. Megan still calls every few Sundays. We never needed a court order or blood relationship to remain connected. We simply chose honesty and treated each other's boundaries as real. For years, I believed the purpose of my records was to build an argument strong enough to make Eric defend me. I was wrong. Evidence cannot make someone value you. It can only show you clearly what is happening and give you the confidence to act when everyone else keeps denying it. The quietest pleasure in my new life is reviewing my bank statement at the end of each month. Nothing is missing. No unexplained withdrawals appear. No one enters while I'm away or opens mail addressed only to me. The numbers balance, but that isn't the best part. The best part is that I no longer need them to prove my life belongs to me.